COVID-19 has increased unemployment, which is, of course, increased poverty across much of the globe. Looking at South Africa, Namibia, Nigeria, they lead unemployment figures globally, showing the extent to which the pandemic has impacted their respective economies. So, how can individuals guide their careers in a post-COVID world? Joining us to discuss further from South Africa is Vumile Msweli, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Hesed Consulting. Vumile, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. What are the ramifications of COVID? I mean, we've seen those numbers on employment. I mean, us here in Nigeria, you there in South Africa, how do you see it?
So I think in South Africa specifically, like a lot of countries across the continent, we've seen our unemployment increase to 44%, which is now leading number one in the world. And this is a trend across the globe. So if you are in an industry which unfortunately isn't growing, which is a number of industries, and isn't able to transition onto technology, you're going to find your job at risk. The second aspect of course, is reduced consumption, which has a ripple effect. We're seeing that as people are not earning as much, the wallet share is reducing. So their ability to even invest in other industries has an impact with supply chains across the world. And actually we're seeing the economy decrease and an increase in unemployment.
So what can an individual, in a South Africa or a Nigerian do to counter the impact of COVID on income in particular?
That's a very valid question, Rotis. And for me, it is to start going into other markets. So if you are sitting in the continent of Africa, one of your advantages is that labor is a little bit cheaper than it would be in other places of the world. So if you've got a skill set that can be, utilized in other countries, specifically in Europe, specifically in America, utilize that. So start positioning yourself as an expert in what it is that you do, but transition to make sure that you can actually get access to those markets. So, of course, using various techniques like getting onto LinkedIn, reaching out to multinationals and offering your service on a consulting basis. And the reason we're seeing this trend of organizations starting to prefer this, reduce costs, they don't have to worry about unemployment insurance funds. The taxes, if you look at the double tax agreements, they tend to be a little bit more favorable to them as opposed to having someone in-house. So these are all things that you can take a look at. You will have some challenges, of course, like what we're sitting with right now in South Africa with regards to power. So making sure that you've got backup power, making sure you've got access to getting great connectivity. You sort that problem out for yourself and you're able to position yourself accordingly.
All right, and great advice. When do you anticipate employment reverting back to pre-COVID numbers and what we consider the prior employee experience?
To be honest with you, my own personal view is that we won't see that for another 5 to 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Because what COVID has also brought into the workplace is automation. We're seeing massive amounts of automation, meaning that even if you were employed prior to COVID hitting, what you used to do will no longer be valid. We also know that it's like 2021 now. By the year 2030, we're anticipating 1 billion people will be freelancers, meaning they will no longer be formally employed in the way that we understand. So that's a massive number of people. So in my own personal opinion, we'll be lucky to see that in 7 years' time. And even if we do, the style of work will fundamentally change into the gig economy.
And how will, as far as, there's a whole big vaccination debate going on around the world now. How will vaccinations impact employee experiences at the workplace?
So we're already starting to see prejudices already for the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. We've heard the joke that those who are vaccinated are waiting for those who are unvaccinated to die, and the unvaccinated are waiting for the vaccinated to die. So that is going to have a massive impact in how you're able to access employment and how you're actually able to even go on to hybrid offices, which is a trend we're seeing where organizations are saying, you can come into the office three days a week. The rest of the time you can work from home. So we are going to see a lot of pressure for people to get vaccinated in order to be able to access employment. But of course, we've also got a challenge on the continent of Africa with, I think, a total of less than 15% of us are all vaccinated. So that's going to have an impact on our ability to be mobile, our ability to access employment. So if we can, as much as possible, shift towards the virtual arena where if you can work full-time virtually as we try to get more and more Africans vaccinated.
And Vumile, as far as the infrastructure that's required for virtual workspaces, it's pretty good, decent where you are, but what's going to be needed to make sure that it supports the virtual path for workplaces going forward?
So when looking at that, it's going to be very, very challenging because we're saying that we need, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to need access to power, which is a challenge across the continent. We're going to need access to connectivity, which is a challenge across the continent because one needs the other. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think if we're looking at countries in West Africa, specifically Nigeria, you're a little bit more experienced from a corporate perspective as to how do we deal when power goes away. Whilst I feel like here in Southern Africa, we're playing catch up. We're like, there's no power, and we're now trying to react. Of course, in South Africa, with what happened recently with the looting, it's also impacted our ability to even get access to things like UPS and generators. So that's also having an impact in our ability to connect with the rest of the world. These are all challenges that I think we did not anticipate, we did not think about. And I think to get us back on board where we can be on par and be able to effectively compete with the rest of the world, it's going to take us a couple of months. As all our governments are starting to look where we're going to get the money from. Here in South Africa, with elections coming around, municipal elections coming around on the 1st of November, it's going to be very, very interesting to see the impact of that.
Great stuff. Vumile Msweli, CEO of Hesed Consulting, thank you so much for joining us to talk about employment in post-COVID world. Appreciate your insights.